At this point, we would normally read Torah and Haftorah, have 7 aliyot and maftir on Shabbat, but we are in different terrain. I was just thinking of this as a period where many of us aren't having the privilege of travel this summer. This is a journey that we're all on together. And I underscore the word together. On this July 4th weekend, our national motto is E pluribus unum, out of the many, one. What is remarkable about America, distinctive to America, is that a diversity of peoples come together as citizens based on their knowledge of law and history. That's the test for naturalization. Do you understand the foundation that links a people of diversity as many into one? In our Torah reading, Moses has a similar challenge. We think of the people of Israel and we say B'nai Yisrael, the children of Israel, as if they have a common ancestor and would be one. But in fact, the people in the desert and the people after would be very diverse. They come from 12 different tribes and more. Mu'urav Rav, a mixed multitude, is part of the encampment. And so as Moses seeks to lead the people to the promised land, the focus of our Torah readings, he has a diverse people. And yet, this diversity was one at Mount Sinai, and that's what allowed the rabbis emphasize for the encounter with God. And as they head to the promised land, often rebelling because of uncertainty, Moses seeks to craft unity. Our Torah reading Chukat emphasizes the importance of ritual as a vehicle for bringing people together, ritual with an underlying value. And that value for this ritual of the sprinkling of the ashes of a red heifer are done to mark God's love of life. Let me explain. A person in the time of the tabernacle in the desert, or later in the time of the temple, could only come to bring an offering if he or she was spiritually untainted by death. If a person encountered a corpse, they needed a transition ritual. And so a non-rational expression of transition was that the priest would prepare a potion of a pure red heifer that would then be burnt, and the ashes would be made into this containment that would be sprinkled, and a person would then be reclaimed as one who had transitioned from death to life. The rabbis say, in describing this ritual, that it was non-rational for the priest who sprinkled the potion became impure in the process. And at the end of the purification of others, that priest had to be separated and then go through a process of purification. In fact, the rabbis would say that even Solomon the wise was baffled by this paradox of how what would purify others would make the priest impure, which is to say that rituals, chukot, that's the name of our first Torah reading, chukat, are not analytically linear. Chukat, rituals, have a quality of the non-rational, but are containers for values that allow, in this case, the people to be united around a common value, that in coming before God, they come to celebrate life, having made a distinction between life and death. The rest of Chukat is filled with drama, the drama of the death of Miriam, Moses' sister, the drying up of the water identified with Miriam, the people rebelling and complaining, a common theme of a life of uncertainty, the death of Aaron, and then on this Shabbat, a double Torah reading, and that of Balak. Balak is a king who has hired a non-Jewish prophet named Bilaam to curse the Israelites. He, the king of the Midianites in the south of Israel, he's concerned, he's heard of the victories of these former slaves on their path, and he hires Bilaam. And initially, Bilaam says, I can't go when asked by the messengers of the king. I can only do what God tells me. Sounds very pious. And he does seem to rely on God or on the spirit of a transcendent presence for his abilities to bless and to curse. Well, the messengers come back to Balak and they say, no go. Bilaam says, I'm not taking it on. God didn't give me permission. So Balak says, go back, but this time not alone. I'm going to send more dignitaries and more money with you to entice, reward Bilaam. And so this time Bilaam says, okay, I will go. But no, again, I can only do what God tells me. And so Bilaam goes on top of this mountain, and he looks out over the Israelites, and then, instead of cursing, he blesses them. Well, the king is very perturbed. And here's a teaching I gained from Rabbi Ilana Greenblatt, who is the rabbi for the Jewish Federation in Los Angeles, and reading her Devar Torah for this week, she pointed out something that I hadn't noticed. In fact, I don't see commented on this page in our Eitz Chaim. It's as follows. So Balak says to Balaam, what have you done to me? Here I brought you to damn my enemies, and instead you have blessed them. He replied, I can only repeat faithfully what the Lord puts in my mouth. Then Balak said to him, come with me to another place from which you can see them. You will see only a portion of them. You will not see all of them, and damn them for me from there. The part that I had never seen till Rabbi Greenblatt's Devar is there's the sense that if you don't see them united as one, then you can maybe bless them. I should say, then you can curse them. Actually, she used it in a little different way, and I want to honor her teaching, which is when you see people up close, it's harder to curse them. You can only do that when they're the other, the foreigner. But the way I want to use this, because my focus in this Devar is really the following. What does it take to create unity? What are the values that unite? And so here, the other way to understand this moment is, if you see them as other than a whole, then maybe you can curse them. But when you see them united, that would stop you. And indeed, in another attempt, there are a series of attempts. Bilaam looks out, and then in his closing attempt will say, Ma tovu ahalecha Yaakov mishkanotecha Yisrael. How goodly are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. And there too, the rabbis will comment that in seeing the people dwelling together, the curse becomes a blessing. The rabbis will comment that Bilaam had only one eye. You say, that's a Hasidic teaching. What does that mean? What do you mean? And of course, it's meant, in this case, metaphorically. They say we have two eyes. One eye is to look at the grandeur of the world around us and to praise God. And the second eye is to see our own humanity, our own fragility, our own creatureliness, and to be humble. And they say of Bilaam, this Hasidic teaching of 150 years ago, that he had only one eye. He could see the grandeur of the world, but he thought of himself as too great. And so that leads me to the last piece of teaching in terms of text, and then to try to pull together on this Chukat Balak Torah reading, July 4th weekend, a final teaching. It's from our Haftorah. I pause to acknowledge it was my daughter Anna Rose Miriam Spitz's Haftorah of 13 years ago, a lifetime ago for her, when she chanted these words of the prophet Micah. With what shall I approach the Lord? Do homage to God on high. Shall I approach God with burnt offering, with calves a year old? Would the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with myriads of streams of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for my sins? And now in quotation marks, God has told you, O human, what is good. Higid lecha adam ma tov. Uma Adonai doresh mimcha. What the ever-present one seeks from you. Ki im asot mishpat. Only to do justice. Va'ahavat chesed, to love kindness. V'hadsnea lechet im Elohecha, and to walk humbly with your God. Those are the core values. Do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with your God. In the Talmud, they will discuss what can you say is the whole of the Torah. There's a number of opinions, and one is that these words of Micah on behalf of God is the sum. The rabbis will interpret these words a little differently. Abravanel, the great commentator of Spain and Portugal of the 15th and 16th century, he says, all begins with justice for a society. For a society to be united, there has to be the reliability that civil and criminal laws are administered fairly. And if so, then that leads to the ability for an individual to act kindly, which is to go beyond what's required by law. There is no law about speaking meanly to somebody else. That's not something enshrined in law, but that's essential. And so law is the formal basis for a society, and that also depends on chesed. And then, for Abravanel, the inwardness of true piety hidden from the world at large is to be and needs to be manifest. Interestingly, for Franz Rosenzweig, the great Jewish philosopher of the end of the 19th century and beginning of the 20th century in Germany, he said that it's the opposite. Humility before God is the unconditional starting point of all true living. It is a standing before the world in a wholly present trust, daring to say truly the truth at every moment. Justice and goodness were the goals yet to be accomplished. And so the question on this July 4th weekend, on this Shabbat of Chukat and Balak, how can we achieve a united nation? And how can we achieve a unity as a Jewish people? One is to acknowledge it's not easy, all the more when there is uncertainty. For uncertainty brings out sometimes a fear that stymies remembering what our goals are. That's the nature of our Torah reading. The people are ready to go back to Egypt repeatedly. They forget why they left in the first place. Uncertainty evokes fear, evokes a longing for security, and often leads to divisiveness. Our Torah is nothing more than a roadmap, not just to a promised land, but how to overcome fear through the rekindling of common values. How do we do that? We do it by acknowledging the importance of rituals. July 4th matters. It's not just another day. It's a day in which we remember that those who created the United States of America, what would be the United States of America, did so with so much uncertainty. In watching the play Hamilton, what I am reminded of is how uncertain it was for George Washington as the leader of a band of rebels to believe that they could break away from the rule of King George and become an independent nation. It was an act of trust, of faith, that if they were pursuing a greater good, a nation that would be created that would say that all people are created equal, with the right of pursuit of shared common happiness. If that was the goal, know that they did it because of a shared vision of what mattered and took enormous risks. Those who were relying on only looking at what was before them would not have trusted necessarily that it was doable. It was not known that it would succeed until it was achieved. And so on this July 4th, what we remember is not victory, but faith. For July 4th, 1776, with the Declaration of Independence, was the declaration that this is worth fighting for. Whether we succeed or not, our lives will depend on our courage to pursue a vision of a greater good. And so what we celebrate on this weekend as Americans is the ability in times of uncertainty to remember the vision of a possibility, of diversity, of equality, of unity that made that fight worth having. They were successful, and in 1789, when the Constitution was approved, it was radical. It was the first constitution of any country in the world that said that all people had the right to be citizens, though it is jarring to know from hindsight that that did not include women and that that did not include African Americans. At a time in which, if there was a minority, frankly, in America, it was the Jews, which is to say, we can't always judge the past by our own standards, but it was precisely because of their vision to forge a common nation of equality that the unfolding of the equality of women and the unfolding equality of blacks and the unfolding equality of diversity of faiths would become what defined America as the land of the free and the home of the brave. So July 4th, the ritual, is not to be analyzed to say, how is this day different than all other days? It's not something that exists, if you will, that you can point to. It's simply another day, but it's a ritual. It's a day we as a nation set apart in order to remember why our ancestors, and they are our ancestors no matter if our parents came into this country with the first of the pilgrims or in a more difficult time where you had to prove through quotas your right to be here. We are all children of immigrants, and on July 4th, that Declaration of Independence is our collective memory of a vision worthy of risk-taking, of sacrifice, of a belief in a better tomorrow. You see, what our Micah says is to the person, to Micah, I don't need those sacrifices. That's the other piece of ritual. That for religious ritual and for American values to have content, it's not about fireworks alone. It's not about the barbecues that some of us wish we could have with more people, this COVID reality. It's about values. What is it, man? It is that I ask of you. It's not your rituals of sacrifice, though rituals which are non-rational are essential to bring you together to remember who you are as one. What I ask is that you only do justice, that you love goodness, that you walk modestly with your God. And so those words of Micah all the more resonate for our founders, for whom the words of the Bible resonated. Ribono Shel Olam, Master of the universe, Shabbat is a ritual. Friday night and Saturday, the sun goes down and rises like any other day. But we set it aside. We mark it as holy time. We do so to say, on this Shabbat, we pause and celebrate, praise, thank for the blessings of our life. July 4th, a ritual. On this day, we pause, we celebrate, we bless and we express gratitude for a nation that is one nation under God, e pluribus unum, of which the many are one. They are only one when we are willing to overlook our differences, to respect each other despite differences, by recalling the common values that every person deserves dignity, that every voice deserves to be heard, that anybody who is a citizen has a right to rise to high office. May we together on this July 4th celebrate with gratitude before you, God, our many gifts. May we do so as a united Jewish people. May we do so as a united nation of the United States of America. And together we say, Amen.